According to what he had to say, the kingdom of Brancott, the country we were in now, was located just around the base of a peninsula sticking out the west from the continent, with 4 more countries located just beyond it. Of the 2 countries sharing a border with Brancott, the kingdom of Balmore lay to the north, while the kingdom of Acede lay to the south, both of which were stable monarchies. Even further to the west of those 2, located on the very tip of the peninsula, was a militaristic nation headed by a dictatorship, the Alago Empire. Now, there was a series of steep mountain ranges that separated the 2 kingdoms from the Alago Empire. It wasn't anything that couldn't be climbed over as long as you tried hard enough, but since the only route available was a long detour by boat, it acted as an inhibitor for trade between them all. The last thing worth mentioning was the Holy Land of Rueda, a religious state located just on the coastline northwest of Balmore. The country shared a border with the Alago Empire, but possessed very little military might on account of them being a fairly small country. Putting it as simply as possible, imagine the Tohoku region of Japan, or look it up but flip 90 degrees to the left. Aomori would be where the Alago Empire was at, Iwate being the kingdom of Balmore, Akita being the kingdom of Acede, and Yamagata and Miyagi combined would be the kingdom of Brancott. If you wanted to head to the continent itself from any of those countries, you would need to pass through Brancott first. The capital of Brancott was actually located a good deal west of the center of the country, while Balmore's capital was the opposite, located farther to the east. The 2 countries were on friendly terms with each other, and the locations of their capitals made them feel even closer together, but in the literal sense of the word. Well, close, as far as this world was concerned anyway. The merchant was nice enough to buy 3 of the going-away presents I had snagged from the Baron's mansion. I made a big show of making it look like I was taking it out of a bag I already had on me, of course. He told me it was going to be a bit less than I'd get at any of the proper shops, but I was more than happy to sell them. Now I wouldn't have to worry about fees for the next few days. I had him drop me off in front of the city gates, said my thanks to him, then we parted ways. Unlike the merchant and his son, who had proof of citizenship and a card showing they were registered merchants, I was a fresh new arrival. It looked like there were still some hoops to jump through before they would let me in. As you may expect from the royal capital, it was a completely walled-off city, and anyone trying to get in had to pass through a gate under protection from the guards posted at it. I was directed to wait in a different line since I was a new arrival, which was when we ended up playing the "What business do you have here" game. Maybe a young girl all by herself was too suspicious after all. Now why are you all alone? Where's your family? The soldier attacks. They're all dead. My uncle stole the house and land my father had left me, then tried to sell me off as a slave as well. That's why I ran away by myself. I thought I might find someone to work for in the city so I can get by. I strike back. The soldier takes a mortal blow. He got to taking care of the rest of my paperwork right away. He said he was sorry to ask, but new arrivals needed to pay 3 silver coins to finish the process, but I was more than set thanks to the merchant buying my stuff earlier. After getting myself a temporary entry pass, I was told I needed to find myself some actual work if I wanted to get an official pass. I was already planning on doing that from the beginning, of course. I was going to get myself a job while figuring out more about this world. I'd decided I wasn't going to sell any more of my healing potions. At most, I would only use them on myself from now on. I might be able to sell other stuff else as long as I don't make it too valuable. Maybe something like good old sodium chloride. No, bad idea. Salt is bad. It's too dangerous to try anything when I don't know how widely distributed it is, or how much it sells for, or even if there's a monopoly on it or something. Nope, not making the same mistake I did with potions again. Gotta live and learn, me. After finally getting through the gates, I began heading toward the place the merchant was kind enough to tell me about that was supposed to help you get work. If I didn't find a good job right away, I'd be sleeping at the inn tonight. If anyone was hiring that'd let me live in-house with them, then my plan was to head over to check it out ASAP. Unlike the Hunters Guild, where mercenaries and soldiers would take on the dangerous jobs like hunting quests and the more perilous gathering missions. The job hunting agency was a place you could find much more normal lines of work. This was the place where the agency could find you jobs working at a store or as a hired hand, all sorts of unskilled labor work, or even safe and simple gathering quests. The employer would fill out a request application and pay a fee to have it put up. Once they found someone they wanted to hire, they would next have to pay an intermediary fee to the agency, since the ones applying to these requests usually didn't have much money in the first place. Even if the person they hired quit immediately after being hired, there were no refunds. They'd picked out the person themselves, and the agency wouldn't hesitate to point that out if they tried saying anything. After I made my way to the job hunting agency, I went ahead and checked out the details for the help wanted requests posted on the board. I looked a bunch of them over, but there were all sorts of extra requirements I couldn't compromise on, such as location, the type of work, their terms for hiring someone, stuff like that. There was one that was in some far-off mountains, another one that was all heavy lifting, one that was for guys only, and another one where you needed prior experience. I couldn't pick one that took up too much of my free time either, since it would interfere with me going out to gather more information about where I was. I was fine with them taking money out of my paycheck as long as I got a place to stay out of it, but working as a maid in a noble's mansion didn't seem like I'd have much me time. I tried applying for a job at a bar, but the lady receptionist turned me down, saying it wasn't something minors could apply for. No matter how many times I told her I was 15, she just told me it wasn't good to lie, no matter how much I wanted a job. It would have been perfect for finding out more about this world, and I probably could have made a good bit of cash off tips too. In the end, I was finally hired as a live-in waitress at a restaurant in town. I'd be completely free to do whatever I wanted outside of my shifts, so that worked for me. It even came with meals included, and you shouldn't think I wasn't grateful to hear that. Though it may be a little late for this now, how about we take a break for lunch? After finally reaching a place to stop in the mountains of paperwork, the first Crown Prince of Brancott, Fernand Brancott, let out a long sigh at Fabio's words. Fabio was the son of the kingdom's prime minister, and, along with Alan, the son of another minister, they'd both been friends with Fernand since they were kids. It wasn't like they all just happened to become friends by chance though. Their parents had decided it was best for them to be together, and their relationship started off as something like the one you would have with a classmate at school. Though it was because of their parents that they had met each other, the three of them actually got along quite well. Before they knew it, they'd actually become true friends. Unlike Fabio, who just seemed like the spitting image of what a prime minister's son should look like, Alan was more like a rugged hunter you'd find in the rougher parts of town. Though he was skilled with a sword, there were parts to him that just didn't seem to fit the noble lifestyle at all. It never crossed their parents' minds that Alan would turn out this way, but Fernand and Fabio liked that about him. The boys had already turned 18, and were already having marriage proposals falling into their laps. As the next in line for the throne, Fernand also had to worry about potential candidates to be the royal consort on top of all that. That said, they were all at the age where they just wanted to mess around and have fun. Finally, are you guys eating in your rooms, or should we just have them bring it here? No, Alan and I were thinking of going into town to grab something to eat. Fernand already knew Alan would go out into town often since he did like food at the castle, but it was a rare event for Fabio to go along with him as well. As Fernand thought that, Fernand had an idea. All right, I'm coming too. I don't know if that's a good idea. Talking down the bewildered Fabio, Fernand got to work getting his outfit together so he could travel incognito into town. This is it. The food's good, but it's also a pretty cool place in general. This was a restaurant Alan had been coming to recently, and had invited Fabio to have him to see it for himself. Fernand and Fabio were hesitant at first to enter a commoner's establishment, but there was no way they could back out now, and that went especially for Fernand. Fernand had been so insistent on tagging along and couldn't embarrass Alan by refusing to go. When the group went inside, they found the restaurant fairly devoid of customers since the lunchtime rush had passed. It didn't seem strange for them to be taking last calls for lunch orders any moment now. Alan picked a table at random to sit down at, then showed the other two the menu. Take a look at the stuff they have down on the bottom right. It's all pretty interesting. When Fernand and Fabio took a look for themselves, they found a variety of dishes listed there, or what they assumed to be dishes at least. Big and soft soup pasta, soup rice plumber salmon edition, tea, amato, C, chicken R, ice E, GG, wraps. What the heck is all this? Fabio was flabbergasted by all this cuisine he'd never heard of before. You can just leave that part to me. Excuse me. 3 orders of TCRE wraps over here, please. Hey. Don't just decide for us. Alan went ahead and ordered for the table, though the looks on the other two's faces seemed less than happy about that. After waiting a bit for the waitress to bring the food to the table, Alan asked her a question. Hey, Amy, do you think we could get some advice today? Sure thing. The only people you have ahead of you is that parent and his kid, so it should be fine. What kind of course you going for? How about we go with 5 silver coins today? Well, look at Mr. Generous over here. Thanks a bunch. The waitress they'd been talking to, Amy, looked in pretty high spirits as she walked away. What was up with that just now? What are you trying to pull, Alan? That's just something you can look forward to finding out. Anyway, you better eat before your food gets cold. Though the other two were plenty suspicious over what Alan was up to, they both dug into their meals. The two were in shock after taking a bite of their food. Their hands stopped for just an instant before digging in with added gusto. Their spoons were practically a blur as they ate. What do you think? Pretty good stuff, right? Just goes to show you can't underestimate commoner restaurants. You're right. You went out of your way to bring us here for it after all. Fabio had no retort to Alan's smug look of satisfaction. But still, Alan kept a mischievous look on his face. What are you talking about? I know the food is good and all, but I wouldn't bring the ever-busy Sir Fabio all the way down here for just that. Fabio had a blank look on his face like he didn't understand what was going on. Fernand seemed keen to know the details but kept quiet watching the two of them talk. I think they should just be about done taking orders now. Right after Alan said that, a girl appeared from the kitchen and headed over to the merchant family sitting near their table. She looked to be about 11 or 12 years old and had black hair and eyes, which was a little unusual to see around here. The way her face looked seemed to suggest she came from a foreign country. She was cute, there was no doubt about that, and she looked like an intellectual to boot. It was just that the look in her eyes was a little on the harsh side. Actually, way on the harsh side, to be honest. Children who were faint of heart probably wouldn't want to get within 5 meters of her, it was so bad. She'd killed at least 4 or 5 people. That was how bad the look in her eyes was. That's Kaoru, the girl I wanted to show you today. Her. Alan gave a wide grin after seeing how surprised Fabio was. Yep, once they stop taking orders, it frees up some time for the other waitresses. After the manager gives the okay, that's when it turns into a sort of counseling center. All the other waitresses get a cut of the profits, so they all seem pretty happy to take on whatever work is left from whoever is doing the counseling. The girl had made it to the table next to them by the time he finished saying that. The 3 of them pricked up their ears and listened in on the conversation. Thanks for always stopping by, Bowman. What did you want advice on today? Actually, it's not me asking the questions today, but my son Charles. Seems like he has something he wanted to ask you about. 5 small silver coins should be enough to cover that then. All right, Charles, let's hear it. Despite the harsh look in her eyes, having a cute girl smile at him caused the 10-year-old boy to blush slightly as he asked his question. It's what we talked about last time. About customers who come to complain. They make up such a small portion of all the customers you get, so wouldn't it be best to forget about them and treat the other not rude customers better instead? Then you wouldn't have to go out of your way to deal with those kinds of people, and you wouldn't have to practice how to work it out with them. Isn't it all just a big waste of time otherwise? The girl answered the young boy's question with a smile, the scary look in her eyes being replaced with something a little more gentle. Actually, it turns out there are tons of people who won't go out of their way to complain to you, even if they're not satisfied about something. Instead of dragging themselves all the way to the store to complain, they can just move on to the next place. Just because they don't come to complain doesn't mean they're all satisfied customers. People like that won't go to the store to complain, but will tell other people instead. When they do, the people running the store will start seeing less customers without knowing why. But among all those customers, there are some who will take the time to tell you the parts about your store that need improving. Wouldn't you be grateful to have people as kind as them do that for you? Still, there are some people who are just trying to get money out of you by making up non-existent problems. You have to make sure and never give them money, even if you think parting with a bit of cash is worth avoiding the issue altogether. If rumor spreads that your shop will just give up money when pressured, you'll get all sorts of unsavory types coming to extort you. You have to be firm and hold your ground against those people, even if it means a loss of profits on your end. Got it. Also, don't you think customers would be happy to see a shop take their advice seriously and put it into practice? Happy enough that they would want to continue giving them their patronage. Catch my drift? Why, yeah, that's true. Listen, Charles. Customers aren't just suckers for merchants to take money from, they're people you do business with on fair terms. They can be friends, and they can be teachers with tons to teach you. I see. The girl continued her explanation, an expression of admiration on the father's face as he listened intently as well. Who is that girl? Fabio whispered. Rather, what is that girl? Pretty cool, right? Alan replied. This is way beyond it being cool or not. You get all that for 5 small silver coins. Fernand interjected. Didn't you say 5 whole silver coins earlier, Alan? I'll let you do the asking, Fabio, so think nice and hard about what you want to make it about. What are you saying, Olive? She appeared. I heard you're going for 5 silver coins today, Alan. Amy was back over there doing that money-making mamba. What type of dance is that? Well, as you can see, I came here with some friends today. This one's Fernie, and the other one's Fabi. This guy said he had something he wanted to ask, right? Alan said, passing the baton to Fabio. You are. Fabio was in full-on panic mode as he desperately tried coming up with a question. Kaoru had a second job. She worked in between being a waitress with the blessing of her manager and fellow waitresses, of course. That job was running a sort of counseling service. She would listen to whatever questions her clients had, then answer those questions and give them advice. She only had a short time to run it, since the only free time she had as a waitress was after the call for last orders was finished. It cost a pretty penny to even get inside the library, and trying to buy a book was basically a pipe dream here. That's when Kaoru decided to open up her counseling service, since she was trying to save up every little bit she could. Being able to talk with a whole rainbow of people could end up being pretty useful too, after all. When she was running her counseling service, her fellow waitresses would have to take over whatever work she had left over, which was why she was giving them a 40% cut of what she made. If 2 people ended up covering her, then they would get 20% each, and so on and so forth. If they were lucky enough to hit upon a customer with deep pockets like Alan, that meant they were getting 1 silver coin apiece. The girls weren't exactly making money hand over fist, so this definitely wasn't an amount to be sneezed at. They would be so over the moon about it they'd start doing that money-making mamba. Kaoru had learned her lesson from last time, and she wasn't going to start selling anything. She was going to be a clever girl and use her wits to make her money. Her job even come with a place to stay, and food on top of that, so she was in no rush to amass her savings. Of course, no one wanted to take Kaoru up on her counseling venture at first. After all, who would come to a girl who looked to be about 11 or 12 and tell her all their troubles, or ask for advice? The advertisement hung near the corner of the wall would just look down glumly at Kaoru. But one day, she reached a turning point. Maybe it was just because he wanted someone to talk to, but a middle-aged man had asked for Kaoru's services. Not only did he pay for the counseling fee of 5 small silver coins, about 500 yen, but he even treated her to something to drink as well. His problem was that he wanted to pass on his business to his 2 grandchildren, but no matter how he tried splitting up the work between them, they always said it was unfair somehow. The man's son had already passed away, and he just didn't want there to be any bad blood between his grandchildren. Piece of cake. I've heard of this before, was the first thing Kaoru thought after hearing him out. Well, first you should ask one of them how they would split the work to make it fair. Afterward, you ask the other one to pick which split of the work they want to do that the first grand could divvied up, and I don't think either of them should have any complaints about it. The man stared blankly back at Kaoru. Kaoru's fellow waitresses and the customers who all just happened to overhear her first ever job were also staring at her in shock. So that's how you do it. When news of her first job spread, Kaoru started getting a slow influx of customers, half of which were messing around with her, and half whom were seriously asking for advice. There were some who just wanted to do nothing more than sit and chat with Kaoru, but a customer was still a customer. It cost a minimum of 5 small silver coins to use her service, with no limit on how much the price could go up. There were times Kaoru would decide how much a session would cost depending on the topic. And there were other times the customer would name their price and Kaoru would tell them only what she thought was appropriate for that amount. There are 2 villages arguing over which one of their sacred trees is bigger than the other and can't climb up to measure them. Measure the length of their shadows at the same time of day. I'm trying to figure out which of these has the larger volume. This wooden goddess statue, or this iron one. Just submerge them in water and measure the... Wait, why do you want to know that in the first place? My boyfriend cheated on me. Break up with him. Over time, it finally got to the point where customers like Ellen would come to ask for her services. I had 2 of my regulars coming in to ask me for advice today. Bowman and Alan. Alan looked like the son of some merchant mogul whose business collapsed or something, but he dressed like a hunter. At first, he would only ask me things half-jokingly, but now we've gotten to the point where he regularly asks me questions and advice on things. Alan was a generous customer with deep pockets, and my fellow waitresses Amy and Agatha were practically jumping for joy when he came. They were already dancing that money-making mamba thing they'd made up earlier. It looked like Alan was being extra generous today, since he was putting down a whole 5 silver coins. I wondered if he was just showing off since he was with his friends. After finishing up Charles's request, the son of the merchant who'd been kind enough to give me a lift to the capital, definitely got a good feeling Charles was going to make a great merchant someday, I headed over to where Alan and his friends were sitting. So, what do you want to ask about? Alan's friend Phoebe seemed a little flustered when he heard me ask that. He took a second to try and get his thoughts in order, then finally asked me a question. I thought the reason they called me over in the first place was because they wanted advice on something. I was just wondering what the nobility could do to increase the tax revenue they get from their territories. I couldn't say I was expecting that one, but I pulled myself together and asked a question of my own. What angle are we talking about here? Agriculture? Trade? Maybe a place that has some industry going for it. Also, are you looking for long or short-term gains, or something else entirely? Phoebe didn't seem to be expecting these types of questions from my end. After hesitating a second, he gave his answer. Let's see. How about the fastest way to expect returns for just your plain old completely average territory?